Hi everyone, welcome you all. In our previous video, we have seen what is trigger and what are the different types of triggers and how to create triggers and so on. So today we are going to see a few more types of triggers, like how we can create a trigger before update and after update. And then we will see how we can test those triggers. So basically before update trigger, which is activated before the update of the data in the table. So before updating the data into the table, so before update trigger will be fired. Now after update trigger will be fired after updating the table. So now we'll see an example. So first of all, let us see the requirement. So here I have a few triggers. So let me just look at the trigger. So the trigger name is before sales update, and this is the name of the trigger. And the type of the trigger is before update. Now the functionality is, so if you update the value in the quantity column or to a new value that is 3 times greater than the current value, the trigger raises an error and stops the update. So what does that mean is, so there is a table called sales, and whenever you try to insert a value in the sales table, so we'll also insert the quantity value, right? So suppose the sales is already having some value, let's say quantity is 100. Next time when you're trying to insert the, or next time when you're trying to update the same data, and I'm trying to update the quantity, that value is, let's say 3 times greater than the existing value. Let us say the current quantity value is 100. Now next time when you're trying to update the record with 300, that means which is 3 times greater than the existing quantity value. So in that case, this particular trigger will be fired, and it will throw, it will raise an error, and it will stop the updating the record in the table. So that is the functionality of this trigger. So let me repeat once again. So there is a table called sales. In the sales table, we have a quantity column. So whenever you're trying to insert the data in this table, by default, it will go and insert and update the data. But whenever you're trying to update the quantity value, and if that value is greater than 3 times with the existing value, then this particular trigger will be triggered, and which will raise an error and stop the update operation. So that is the functionality of the trigger. So now we'll see how we can implement this trigger. So for that, we need a table called sales table. And this is the structure of the sales tables, which contains the product information, quantity, and so on. And then we will try to insert some data also in the table. And after that, we will try to create a trigger, and then we'll see update operation. So first of all, let me just create a required table and try to insert the data in the table. So go to MySQL, and I'm just copying the same query here. And this particular statement will create a new table called sales in the classic models database. Now let me just execute this query, and now it is created. So the new table is created. Now if I just refresh this, and you can see the sales table, and which contains multiple columns, right? So now let me try to insert the data in the sales table. So currently I'm inserting 3 records, like by using insert command, insert into sales, and these are the columns, and these are the 3 different rows I'm going to insert in this particular table. So first of all, we need to have some data in the table, and now I'm trying to insert this data. So when you execute this query, so now 3 records are inserted. Now let me just look at the data in the tables, select the star from sales. And when you execute this, which will give you 3 records. So currently we have a 3 records, and 1, 2, 3. Even first record quantity is 120, second record quantity is 150, and third record quantity is 200. So this is the quantity values which we have updated, or which we have inserted along with the records. All right. So now, so once we have this table and contain some data, so whenever you update any record, let's say every record is having quantity value, right? Suppose let us say first record. When I try to update the first record with the quantity value is 3 times greater than this 120, and then the trigger will be fired, and that will throw an error, and update should stop. That means the quantity should not greater than 3 times. Okay, so like this we need to create a trigger. Now let me just go and get the trigger. So this is the trigger which we are going to create. Now let me just explain how this is going to implement. So first of all, we need to set the delimiter // and this is a statement, create a trigger. This is the name of the trigger, and before update. So this trigger should be fired before update operation on sales table. So this trigger should be on this particular table. So before update operation and begin section, and this is the end section. Inside this, we declare some variable called error message. This is a variable, and I set some value into this error message. So what is the value is, this is a value. So the new quantity, and I'm getting this quantity value from the query at the runtime. And also I'm displaying that quantity value. The new quantity, the quantity value cannot be 3 times greater than the current quantity. And then I'll specify the old quantity. So what is the new dot quantity, old dot quantity? New dot quantity means whatever the update statement we are executing against the table, and whatever the quantity we are specifying in the update statement, that is a new quantity, new dot quantity. And what is this old dot quantity? What is the value which is already there in the table? So that is a old dot quantity. Okay, so new and old, by using these keywords, we can access the data from the table. So this is the error message I have set. And when this error message should send, whenever you do update, and that time your quantity value is greater than 3 times with the existing quantity, and then this particular error message we have to throw. So we need to check the condition here. If new dot quantity is greater than old dot quantity into 3, means 3 times greater than, and then we are throwing this error. So signal SQL state, this is a statement which we use to throw the error and error code. And along with that, set message underscore text equal to error message. So with this particular code, we are sending this message as an error. And if this condition is matches, so this is the actual trigger. Now let me just create a new trigger. I have selected this and then execute. So now the trigger is created. Now how we will know whether trigger is created or not? We can simply say show triggers. Right, show trigger. So this command will show you what are all triggers are created inside the database. Now earlier we already created 2 triggers. Now we created another trigger called before sales update. So this is the trigger which we created. All right. So once you created your trigger, so now we need to test it. So what is the functionality of the trigger? So whenever you try to update the record with the quantity value, which is 3 times greater, then this trigger will be fired. Okay, that is a functionality of the trigger. Now let me just test this trigger. So for testing this trigger, we need to have a test case. Now here, this is a test case which we created for testing the trigger. Now what we need to do in the first step, we'll try to update the first record first. Okay, first let us try to update the first record with the quantity, let's say 150, and which is not exactly greater than 3 times of existing quantity. So obviously the data successfully updated. So when you execute this query, the data should be successfully updated. That's your expectation. But when you update the data in the table and with the quantities 500, which is greater than 3 times with the existing values, then you will get the error code and the data should not be updated in the table. Okay, now let me just try these 2 queries. The first query is, let's try to update the table, and let me just remove this. So currently these are the values we have, right? So select the star from sales. Select the star from sales. So these are the 3 records currently we have. So current quantity is 120 is there. So let me just update the records. Update sales, which is a table name, set quantity equal to 150. So currently is 120 is there, and I'm just updating as a 150, and where ID equal to 1. So this ID I'm taking ID equal to 1. So when I execute this query, which will successfully update the first record 120 to 150, because 150 is it is not greater than 3 times of existing value, which is 120. So which will execute successfully update. Now when I execute this, now it is updated. Again, if you just look at the data, previously it was 120, now it becomes a 150, perfectly fine. So this time the trigger is not fired, because when the trigger will be fired, if this quantity value is greater than 3 times of existing value, then the trigger will be fired. Now it is not fired, so the trigger is not fired. Now data is successfully updated. So now let us see the this particular query, and this particular query will update the same record. Let me just say update sales, set quantity equal to 500, where ID equal to 1. So again, I'm updating the same record, and this time I'm updating 500. That means it is greater than 3 times. So 150 into 3, which is greater than 500, right? So that's the reason this particular query should throw the error. So current value is 150, 150 into 3, that is a greater than 500. right? So now let me just execute this query. And as soon as executed, now we got an error. So let me just read that error, what it is throwing. So we can just look at this. This is the error code. So the new quantity 500 cannot be 3 times greater than the current quantity 150, right? So this is a error we got, and this error is written by the trigger. So now the trigger is got fired. Now if I just look at select star from sales, now the data is not updated. So still 150 is there. Okay, so now the trigger is exactly firing whenever you are passing the quantity which is greater than 3 times of existing quantity, and then trigger is successfully fired and it throws an error, and along with that it is not updated the record in the table. So now according to the test case, my tests are passed. So this is our expected, this is the query which we need to run, and this is our expected result. And whenever you try to update the same record with 500 quantity, because which is greater than 300, 3 times greater than the existing value. So in this case, trigger should found the new quantity, and which is caused the violation of trigger and then raised an error. So this is how we need to test the trigger. So this is a one type of trigger. So before update. So before updating the table itself, we are checking the quantity value is greater than 3 times of existing quantity, then we find the trigger. That is before update. Now we'll see one more example, how we can create a trigger after update. So after successful updated, then the trigger will be executed. So now we will see that. So for that also we need a sales table. So I already created one sales table which is contains some data, right? So let me just try to understand the requirement. So trigger 4. So here the trigger name is after sales update, and this trigger should be fired after update. After successfully updated, then this trigger should be fired. Now the description is, if you update the value in the quantity column to a new value, the trigger insert a new row to log the changes in the sales changes table. So now we need one more table called sales changes. So what does that mean? So first of all, we need to have a sales table. Okay. And then we need to have one more table called sales changes table. So now what we need to do is whenever you try to insert or whenever you try to update the value salary, so not insertion, updated. Whenever, suppose let's say I have one record here, the quantity value is 100. Now this is the existing quantity. Now whenever I try to update this record, let's say initially it is 100, now I'm updating as a 200. Now, whenever you try to update this value, so update should be successful. After updation, the sales changes table should be inserted old quantity value and new quantity value along with the ID. So this information should be inserted in the sales changes table. And this action should be done after successfully updated record in the sales table. Okay, so that is how the trigger should be designed. So what this trigger will do is this trigger will be fired after updation. So what we need to update? We need to update the quantity value. So as soon as you updated the quantity value in the sales table, then immediately the sales changes should have some data. What is the data? Along with ID, it should maintain the old quantity value and the new quantity value which were updated. So both the quantity values should be maintained in the sales changes table. Okay, that's how we need to design the trigger. Now let me show you. So sales table we already have. So now we need to design the sales changes table. So this is a declaration of sales changes table. So let me just execute it. Sales changes table. So which is also having ID, sales ID, before quantity, after quantity. So these are the two columns which we will insert. Now execute. And now this is created a new table, which is sales changes. Let me refresh the tables. And now we can look at this. We have a sales changes table. So as soon as we have a tables, sales table is available, sales changes table also available. Now sales table is also contain some data here. Okay. Now let me just create a trigger now. So how to create a trigger? So this is my trigger which is created. Let me just copy and let me just expand here. Okay. So this is our trigger which we created. So this is a daily meter and the trigger name is after sales update. Create trigger after sales update. That's my trigger name. and this trigger should be fired after update on sales table. This trigger should be fired after update on sales table. So what this trigger should do is, in the begin and end section, we need to specify if a old dot quantity, suppose whenever trying to update the record will be updated in the sales table. After updation, it will get the old quantity from the table, and which will compare with the new quantity. If both are equal, then this statement is not executed. So this trigger will not execute, will not do anything. But if the old quantity value is not equal to new quantity value, then there is a difference. Then updation should be successful, right? And then what we need to do, we need to insert this data in the sales changes table. So insert into sales changes, sales ID along with the before quantity value, after quantity value. So these two values we need to insert in the sales changes table. So whatever the update query we executed at the runtime, that query will automatically updated the sales table. After updation, we will also get the quantity values from the table and query. Then we will insert the data into this sales changes table. And the values are old.id, old.quantity, new.quantity. So old means old is a keyword, new is a keyword. So old.quantity means what? Which will get the existing value from the table, the quantity value. New.quantity will get a new quantity value, which is updated through update query. So this is a trigger. So this is a trigger which is basically whenever you do update on the sales table, the update will be successful. After updation, it will check the quantity value is equal to existing value. If not equal, then it will go and insert the quantity details in the sales changes table. So that's how this trigger fired. Now let me go and create this trigger. Yeah, now it is created. So as soon as you created your trigger, now you can check whether it exists or not. Show triggers, then execute. So now we can see here after sales update, now the trigger is created. So as soon as the trigger is created, now let us test this trigger, whether it's working fine or not. So for that, we need to write a test case. So here we have written a few steps in the test case. Now let us test it. So first of all, how we can test this? So first of all, we need to update the quantity value. Let's update the quantity value of the first record. Okay. And then what we need to do, automatically the trigger should be fired automatically. So let me just execute this query. So currently, if I just look at this sales table, let me execute select a star from sales. And this particular table contains the 3 records. Now currently quantity value is 150. So now I'm trying to update this value with the 350. Okay, so update sales at quantity equal to 350. So previous value is 150. Now the new value is a 350. So this value is a differ, right? So now as soon as you updated, so now the record is updated in the sales table. Now if I just go to the sales table, now 350 updated. But I want to log that information. Previously, what is the quantity I have in this record and what is the new quantity? So this information I want to maintain in another table, and that is done by the trigger. Now updation is successfully done. So immediately what happens? The trigger is fired. After trigger is fired, what we are expecting now? We are expecting the data should be there in the sales changes table. Now let me just execute select a star from sales changes table. And this table should contain the data. So now we can just ID, sales ID equal to 1. Before quantity, previously the value is 150. Now the new value is 350. And where it is updated, the date is updated along with the timestamp. So who is done this job? The trigger is done this job. So whenever you try to update the quantity here, and immediately what happens? The trigger is got fired, and the trigger will add or insert a new record in this sales changes table along with the previous quantity value and new quantity value. Suppose I'm trying to update the same record with the same value again. Now this time the trigger won't, because the condition will not match. So the trigger won't fire. So again, if you just look at the sales changes, which is contains again same record. But whenever you change this value, quantity value, there is a difference in the old and the new quantity values, then trigger will be fired. Okay, so this is the function. So now in the first step, what we have done is we executed this query, and then what happens? We query the table sales changes, and the trigger should trigger automatically. So that we have seen. So the trigger is inserted a new record in the sales changes. which contains a old quantity value and new quantity value. Now in the step 2, what we need to do is let us try to update all the records. Let us say I'll update quantities 10% more. All 3 rows, I'm just going to update quantity values 3%, 10% more. I'm just trying to update. So let me just execute those queries. So what this query will do is whatever the current values which we have in the sales table, now you can just look at this. There are 3 records we have: 350, 150, 200 quantity values. Now what I'm doing is I'm just increasing the 10% more the quantity values for all the records. So this is the query I'm writing: update sales set quantity equal to quantity, what is existing value, into 1.1 as unassigned. And again, I'm doing the casting here. And this particular thing will increase the quantity value 10% more. That means this query will update all 3 records. Means what? How many inserts we will able to see in the sales changes table? Totally 3 inserts we will able to see, because we are updating all 3 records, right? For every row, there will be no insert statement will be created in the sales changes. Previously 350, 150, 200 is there. Now let me just execute this query, update. So now the updation is done. Now if I just go and see the sales changes, now you can just look at another 3 rows are inserted. So previously 350, 150, 200 is there. And after updation of all the records, 385, 165, 220 is updated. So 10% quantities more is updated. So we can update a single row, trigger is fired, and also we updated multiple rows, then also trigger is got fired. So this is how we can just test the trigger whether it's working fine or not. Okay, so this is all about before update and after update trigger. In the next video, we will see how we can work with the before delete and after delete type of triggers. Okay, so that's all for this video, guys. Thanks for watching. We will see in the next video.